title of my presentation today to Seeing Engagement, Visualization Beyond the Hype, which I find a little sexier. And so, I don't, yeah, something seems to be missing. Okay, so I'm interested in online engagement, learning practices, knowledge production online through blogs, wiki, and other participatory platforms. What's the role of technology and how does it mediate interactions online? How is it possible to design technologies that facilitate the inclusion of ordinary non-experts in different ways? So, when we use social media, we often act from inside, within a digital mode of affordance. So these are the kind of characters we find in SimCity and in New York virtual city, and it's a little bit what I don't know who presented yesterday is we're inside the box, so we don't necessarily have this overview of things that tell us what's going on right now. So we use features and apps to enable our expression, allow them to direct our social traffic. But when we try to make sense of the social inside social media, we are surrounded by noise. Social media obscures rather than shows our relationship and our activity. For example, the email reader that we use every day for work and in personal life is great at sending messages back and forth, but it will not let us see our connections or their degrees of interactivity or reciprocity. Our actions are somewhat contained and constrained by the materiality of the space we act in. And this is very true in offline. The ground supports our physical bodies, interactions and movements, but unless we dig and unearth out traces of our existence and movements, our reality, relationships, engagement with objects and our connections to the past will remain invisible, and hence, this famous quote by Latour, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a map can be worth a whole forest. So for this reason, our online activity and digital footsteps are important to study, as it is important to develop the work we do to retrieve and communicate them amidst the noise. So here are a quote from Housley. So visualizations as data can inform the development of new ways of mapping controversies in ways that can document how different tropes, groups and claims are mobilized. So in the digital world in particular, data are becoming increasingly valued and relied upon as tropes and signifiers of society and the world we live in. This is more so in the social sciences, as we see in this quote, and the idea that with enough data, the numbers speak for themselves is now quite famous, and I'm referring to Chris Anderson's paper, The End of Theory, and it's also been criticized in the famous paper of Dana Boyd and Kate Crawford. Also focal to this idea of big data are visualizations, which are presented as knowledge tropes and the means to the truth. They often appear to be neutral, or so the conventions of graphical representations will lead us to believe. Together, the numbers, the rules of geometry, and the computational power combine to create an impression of universality or impartiality, an ideological window from which we have the illusion of peering into pure scientific facts in action with no or little human intervention. This is not true, of course, as visualizations are a handmade machine that, at the end of the day, still has to work. So our first question is what to visualize? What are the major conventions that are available to visualization designers and how they enable and constrain what can be visualized. So here we have like three major ways of visualizing evidence. The most common visualization is the charts, but increasingly we use sociograms, the social networks, to map social media data. So visualization and social networks analysis are powerful rhetorical forms, but deciding what to visualize remains an important question. Both the type of data as well as the visual output have to be closely connected with the research objectives and these things that we decide to make visible and de facto making other things invisible. All of this must, of course, be seen from the perspective of a two-dimensional viewpoint. Here we have a top-down view as in maps and pie charts, and here we have a front-on view where we have X and Y axis. So what makes visualization work? Because of that, we believe that visualization is a method and a way to approach and gain knowledge. Ellen Kennedy, who runs a project called Scene Data, argues that there are a handful of core things that matter when visualizations are concerned. The subject matter, we have to be interested in the subject, the provenance of the data, of course. So if someone trusts a newspaper or a particular social media platform, he will be more inclined to examine the visualization in a more favorable light. The views expressed also are important, whether they challenge people in a good way. And most importantly, visualizations talk to our affect. Pictures have a way to our heart that thousands words can sometimes fail to convey. Many people react emotionally to the aesthetic side of visualizations, and when you have a colorful sociogram with bells and whistles, you have people saying, oh, that's a really cool chart. For this reason, we know now that aesthetics matter. So what could be a philosophy of aesthetics in the social science or in the sociology of science and technology? That's also an interesting question. The affective and aesthetics of visualization are really important, but they are not necessarily new. In fact, none of these aspects mentioned here is new. We know already that visualization literacy is crucial, especially when presented with obscure charts that require advanced statistical and numerical skills. So it is still important for people to be able to recognize the visualization and just read it. Like here, I mean, because the visualization is so small, you cannot read it, but what it shows is the movement of immigrants from the countries that are represented here. And it all seems like neat and clear, while we know that immigrants don't necessarily go directly from a point X to a point Y, and they may stop in the middle. So this visualization is kind of saying a story on its own. In the case of sociogram, it's fair to say that time, data, and visualization skills are all important aspects of understanding visualizations and engagement. But while some people may take only minutes to make sense of a graph, others need longer, and those are often more likely to engage also with what lies underneath the surface of the graph. To conclude, we argue that it's not enough to create visual outputs. We often need something more to support interpretations. We argue also that visualizations don't explain, but they often are where the explanation is to be found. This is what we will demonstrate in the following slides and through this example. So this example is based on a case study, a longitudinal 5 years empirical research looking at knowledge and organizational practices of a community of open source software developers, but also users, participants. Mythos is a global community which has created a backstage solution. for cash flow management, and who had aimed it at users in the microfinance sector, so mainly NGOs and small self-help groups. When we started examining MIFOS, the mailing list, this is a snapshot of the mailing list, had over 500 subscribers, a majority of whom were active members of the community and representing over 18 countries. Okay, and here we have another snapshot, which shows NodeXL, a visualization tool that actually anybody can use because it's a plugin that you install on Microsoft Excel. And what it does is that it imports an interactional data set and converts it into a graph using centrality metrics of graph theory. So the immediate result is this hairy ball, especially if your data set is more than a couple hundred of rows. Okay, so of course this is not the kind of visual outputs you often see in the published papers. What we seldom hear in visualization talks is the hermeneutics and the work involved in picking layouts and metrics to enhance the visual outputs of the objects in the graph. So with this data, we decided to map MIFOS community, put it together to understand better the stuff is made of. And the main reason is that mailing lists are a pivotal interactional tool in open source communities, which allow members to interact with each other, and we wanted to know who these people are, how they socialize, and how they collaborate. Here we present two sociograms which came out of the hairy ball, and you can see they are neat and tidy. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we were interested in participation and online engagement, how people build long-term membership as community and as development goals and as a community of practice, because open source software is a bit of all these. Also, what binds them together, this kind of immaterial or fluid substance that keep the work going and the community together. So here you can see these are clusters of people, and the different shapes represent different profile knowledge. Profile knowledge are actually an analytical category that is that we were able to map based on members' organizational affiliation and background knowledge. So we already kind of show that open source communities are not just communities of developers. We can see that many types of expertise are represented and many interest groups are represented. Here we use the frequency of interactions, okay, to to shape the size of the nodes and the frequency of email exchanges between them. Shows the thickness of the die. The same measurements are used for this graph and shows kind of flows of data from between countries where these participants are based. So the two graphs show structural attributes of participation built in different ways. We can see here three structural attributes of the network. First, the frequency of posting, which can be understood as labor and is here captured by the size of nodes, as I said. Second, there is the connectivity, that is the tie between nodes, or interactivity, which is an interactivity measurement. In network vocabulary, it's called in degree, out degree. That's the measurement we selected, at least for this graph, which can also be used to characterize socialization and enable us to identify network density, whether the community is centralized or not. You can see that it is centralized because we have a kind of central node in the middle. It's important to notice that we were not able to get these graphs if we didn't include exogenous attributes. So there is the internal dynamics of the graph shapes how nodes are positioned. So the frequency, the volume of exchanges, explains the position of the node in the graph. But the knowledge profile and the geographical location are exogenous attributes, external attributes that are not computed by the matrix. And it's important to say that the incorporation of external qualities in a graph is not a very a mainstream SNA method. It holds its own challenges and assumptions. First, one needs to have collected the data, that is the knowledge profile here and the geolocation, and to match it with the data set. Also, there are ethical implications that I will not discuss here, because where you get the data and how can you get the informed consent of 500 participants is also a problem. Third, the import of such data in the graph is not neutral in so much that it provides some form of explanation to the way nodes and ties are laid out. So we also argue that we researchers infer explanation from the position of the nodes in the graph, but participants already know this information. So details about members' roles, profession, identity are often enclosed in email bodies. Knowing who in the mailing list is important, but it doesn't determine the action of the nodes themselves. Because of that, we have included a matrix of exogenous traits, and we created these graphs to represent what participants already know. But our question, they are not really answered. Certainly, visualization allows us to reassemble the social. The same way we have reassembled Mythos community to showcase certain attributes of their knowledge organization, but key questions and concerns remain as the form of association, the form of mediation and disruption cannot be studied through these visualizations. How do things and participants engage, associate, and organize? Why do these networks change over time? How does expertise trickles down in online communities and multi-level systems, and how could it be more interactive? So we kind of went beyond visualizations, and we are represent here stories in text. We have identified 56 micro-narratives from the mailing list, participant stories, through email threads that sometimes stretch over 5 years. These allowed us to finally study participation as an individual and a collective performance, rather than as a structural measurement of relational participation. I'm not going to go through the results of these methods, but it's important to understand why we used it, because we wanted somewhat to assess the quality of participation, what's the quality of these posts, how they create local knowledge, and how they enable people to learn. We also conclude that posts are very discursive devices as features of the mailing list, as well as forms of writing combined in order to make some posts more effective than others, and therefore some participation more effective than others. So what I'm going to conclude here, and what I would like to say is that it's very important to establish a dialogue between methods. As for this study in particular, there are many things that one can criticize, not the least that the critical SNA literature discusses in terms of the constraints of this esoteric language that is SNA, talking about in degrees and centralities and so on. So it doesn't extend beyond the analysis of the interactions and the dynamic of the graph. There is also the problem of the lack of sexiness, if you want, of the ethnographic research and narratives in particular, given their length, especially in online research with high volumes of data. What I learned from this project is that participation is multi-level, multi-lens, which may require more than one method and multiple perspectives, while our first results with the visualization left us, I would say, underwhelmed with a sense of incompleteness. we were not able to answer the questions that we were set to study originally, how participants organize, but I'm not sure that we could have ever made it through the 20,000 forest of text emails if we were not guided by the visualizations and the work that we have done to profile and extract participants' data. So in this way, the visualizations were very interactive platform for exploration, and the metrics that we used were signals of presence and sometimes of absence that still required us to look into in more details. So, thank you.